the arrival of women here in Virginia. I want to put that history in a little bit of context. Why did they come? Because in November of 1619, the colonists realized that if Virginia was going to survive as a colony, as a permanent settlement, they needed women. So they recruited women, quote, to make wives to the inhabitants. 90 women arrived in May of 1620, and another 57 in 1621. But their rights were surrendered to their husbands. They could not vote. They could not hold public office. They could not own property. Other women who came that year were considered property. In 1776, as a result of the Age of Enlightenment, as we were beginning to birth a new nation, the Declaration of Independence established the principle that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then in 1789, as her husband was going to the Constitutional Convention, Abigail Adams said, "Remember the ladies and be generous and more favorable to them than your ancestors." They didn't. They weren't. But through the process of amendments, through the process of the suffragette movement, through the process of the women's rights movement, through the process of the civil rights movement, we began to change that in the wake of the Civil War. When rising out of the ashes of a nation torn apart, we recognize everyone born here as a citizen. We did not give them all the rights that came with citizenship. That was rectified 150 years ago for African American men by giving them the right to vote. But not until the 19th Amendment were women given the right to vote in the Constitution. Those amendments in and of themselves were not enough. They started the process. But when those amendments were passed, African American women still were not granted the vote. They needed legislation that built upon that foundation to grant them that. After centuries of unequal treatment, it doesn't go away with a magic wand. We understand that. It's a process. But that process must be rooted in the founding document of our nation. Women are 50% of the population, higher than that here in the Commonwealth. In other countries who look to the United States as a model in creating their constitution, women are granted equality. Why not here? In our founding document, it is time to remember the ladies. In our founding document, it is time to say it is unacceptable that after 400 years, there are still only 4 women who have been nominated by their party to run for statewide office, one of whom is in this room. That after all of these years, there still has not been a woman president. After all these years, if you look in the boardrooms, in the courtrooms, in the state house, we are not equally represented. The reasons are barriers that were put in place in the law long ago that by enshrining equality under the law for all, we can finally begin to eradicate. And for that reason, we've waited too long. It is our time. Thank you.
Okay. Are there questions for Senator McClellan? Okay, Senator Sassol, you're also a chief co-patron, so.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Let me give you just a quick brief history. I got to the General Assembly in the 70s, and that's 19, not 18. And the ERA was just getting started, as far as being able to go through the states. We were never able to get that out of committee in the House. And the first time it came to the floor, I think, was 80 or 81 in the U.S. Senate. and at the time believing that Chuck Robb, who was the lieutenant governor, could vote to break a tie, one of the Republican senators backed off and didn't vote, so it was 20-19 to pass it, or 20-19 against it, and it failed. And we haven't had a good shot at it until recently. But I want to tell you of one or two situations that I distinctly remember if you don't think that action by us is important. Many of, I don't know how many of you, but quite a few of you probably know of Barbara Keenan. She's a justice now on the, judge on the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. She became a general district judge at age 30, circuit court judge 2 years later, and she was the first woman circuit court judge, I think, in the state. And Chuck Robb created the Court of Appeals, and when I remember, I think it was in 85 or 86, I was one of the people that presented her. Hardaway Marks, I think, was chair of Courts of Justice in the House. And I gave her a very, very glowing introduction. And let me tell you what he said. She was a graduate of Cornell undergraduate school, and George Washington Law School, and a master's degree in law from UVA in the 90s, early 90s. He said to her, if you're so damn smart, why didn't you go to UVA? And she says, because your predecessors wouldn't let me. She says, what do you mean? He says, women were not allowed at UVA. And incidentally, I've got a memorial resolution being circulated on the floor of the Senate. Alan Diamondstein was one of the people who sponsored the bill that required UVA to admit women. They've been dealing with things like this for a long time to come. We got a new senator who from Virginia Beach who was a helicopter pilot. And you tell me that people like her and all women haven't earned the right after 240 years to be written into our Constitution. Who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? And all the things that everybody says will happen if you do that. Some of the, when I voted in 1982, I got up on the floor, gave a speech, voted for it. Virgil Goode got up and said, he turned and looked at me, and he said, Senator Saslaw, you vote for this ERA, which I did. He says, and let me tell you what's going to happen. There are going to be women in combat, be women flying these military aircraft. There'll be common toilets. He went on and on. I ran into Virgil in 2007 down at the celebration in Jamestown. I said, Virgil, you remember that speech you gave to me? I said, damn, if you weren't right. I voted for the ERA, and sure enough, there were women in combat. But the point is that there's no legal foundation, and we need to do something about it. And this is where it starts. And, we need to get the ball rolling and get this thing out of committee, onto the floor, and through the General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Senator Saslaw? Okay, as I said at the beginning, I'd like for 3 people on for to speak, and then 3 people against, and 2 minutes each. And I will give everybody a chance to hold up their hands and say whether they're for or against. But I think I hope we can limit it to that 3 apiece.
Hello, my name is Easton Webber.
And I'm Tahavati, and we are 12 years old.
We are grateful for all the people in this room and in this building that have been fighting for equality before we were even born. I've learned so much from you about fighting for what is right. But I've also been disappointed by the elected officials that have lectured me in public hearings and the others that have looked me in the eyes, patted me on the head, and then turned around and voted against me. Not only did they vote against my fair and equal future, they voted against the 75 million other girls in this country that want full equality under the Constitution. People ask me why I got involved in the ERA, and I say I'm not old enough to vote, but I am old enough to show up, and I am old enough to pick up everybody around this country, and I am old enough to help change the future for future generations.
As a 12-year-old male, I'm here to support my friend in 2020, and I'm surprised that the ERA hasn't passed yet. When we learn about the Constitution, it implies that men and women both have the same rights, and that's simply not true. All does not mean all, and I realize that at this point in my life. It's the 21st century, and we still have inequality in the Constitution.
Me, Taha, and the 2 million other kids in Virginia represent the best of Virginia.
We are the future of this country.
And we are your future.
Today we are asking for you to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment.
It is time for Virginia to show the world that she believes our future is one worthy of being on the right side of history. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Tell me where you're from. Where are you all from?
I'm from Powhatan.
Okay.
Chesterfield.
Chester-
Yeah, Chesterfield.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. Who's next? Okay, and if you could tell us who you are and where you're from to start off with.
So my name is Edie Florrick, and I'm from Henrico. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edie Florrick. And when I was Easton and Ta's age, I learned all about how the Civil Rights Act and Martin Luther King Jr. solved racism in the 1960s, and the Equal Rights Amendment and Gloria Steinem solved sexism in the 1970s. Believe it or not, I actually did ace my history classes. So I learned when I was their age that I didn't need to worry about any of this equality stuff because my mother's generation had already taken care of it. Stupid me. So I'm 28 now, and I've learned a few more things. I've learned that simple laws passed by Congress are not permanent legal protections because the Violence Against Women Act expired 3 weeks ago and everyone just didn't talk about it. I've learned that women's work like pregnancy, K through 12 education, and domestic work is financially devalued across the country, and that devaluation is legal. And I've learned even such basic necessities as paid maternity leave and affordable childcare are not considered top priorities by our overwhelmingly male politicians. Even as the U.S. birth rate drops below sustainable levels and potential parents cite finances as a top reason for delaying or foregoing parenthood. I've learned that women entering the workforce has not inspired men to do equal amounts of work in the home, and that housework and childcare in high-income households have been outsourced primarily to women of color. I've learned that 80% of Virginians agree that the Equal Rights Amendment should be in the Constitution, and then I watched last year as the legislature refused to pass it. The Equal Rights Amendment is not a partisan issue unless politicians choose to make it so. But if those politicians choose to make overwhelmingly popular issues partisan, well, I see some new faces here. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Are there any questions? Thanks very much. Come on up. Please introduce yourself by tell us where you're from.
Thank you. My name is Tanya Roberts. I am from Halifax County, Virginia. Good afternoon. I am from an area where there are many women who are advocates for equal rights, and though we are tucked away in the southern part of Virginia, we are listening and we are on track. The Equal Rights Amendment must be ratified post haste. I am a daughter of a mother who was a retired school teacher. I'm the granddaughter of grandmothers who were domestics and agriculturalists or farmers. And I am part of a family who persisted and achieved despite inequality. And so today I stand before you as a mother of 3 daughters. And all of my daughters seek higher purpose in male-dominated fields such as architecture, international relations, and scientific research. Should yet another generation of women have to work harder to be paid less than their male peers. If you have daughters, or you dreamt of having daughters or granddaughters, or perhaps a woman has had a positive impact on your life, then you should be crossing the aisles and ratifying the ERA, making the ERA a reality and inequality of memory. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of humanity, an issue of just treatment, an issue of decency. The civil rights of all Americans, present and future, regardless of their gender, regardless of background, must be protected with all due immediacy. The opportunity to take a bipartisan action is now. Be on the right side of history. Make America live up to its promise and vote to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of this witness? I'd ask for everybody who is in support of the resolution to raise their hand. Okay. Now I'm sure thanks very much. I'm sure there's another view, so 3 people from who oppose each have 2 minutes to speak. Yes, ma'am, if you could identify yourself by name and where you live.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is, and members of the committee, my name is Colleen Holton. I'm an attorney from Yorktown, Virginia. I'm a board member with Eagle Forum, and I represent the Virginia Family Foundation. And as you consider this legislation that purports to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, I would submit to you that if you're truly concerned about inequality and injustice, and I assume that everybody who seeks office in this honorable body is, we need you to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars so that you can fund priorities that will ensure equality of opportunity. Things like raising teacher pay, things like improving education, and helping actual victims of injustice, things like improving our foster care system. One of the worst things that you could possibly do is to pass this long dead amendment and put Virginia taxpayers on the hook for millions of dollars in legal fees to fight an unwinning legal battle, notwithstanding the report that we heard from the Attorney General's office, although the report that you heard makes it clear that this is going to be a legal battle and it is going to be ongoing. Now, you heard some of the reports about the deadlines and the issues involved. When Congress initially passed the Equal Rights Amendment, it was given a 7-year deadline, and one of the things that the representative from the Attorney General's office failed to mention is that many of the 35 states that did pass ratification language specifically reference that deadline within their legislation. So this would be any argument that this amendment is still viable would have to overlook the will of those states' legislatures. Additionally, they omitted the fact that 5 of those states voted to rescind their 4 voted to rescind their ratification, and 1 of the states specifically sunsetted their ratification. So clearly, as the Office of the Justice Department has indicated, this amendment is constitutionally dead. And this directive was to the National Archivist, who is the person responsible for making the amendment an official part of the Constitution. So it's clear that no bill passed today is going to make ERA part of the Constitution, but what it is going to do is sign a blank check on behalf of the Virginia taxpayers, and we ask you, please don't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there questions of this witness? Okay, is there another witness? Yes, ma'am, if you can tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, Senator, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Olivier Gans Turner. I am the president of the Virginia Society of Human Life. I represent thousands of Virginians who are concerned about this issue. And we are concerned because although the Virginia Society of Human Life has never taken a position against the concept of the ERA, we are opposed, as we have always been, to this version of the ERA that has been introduced today and consecutively in Virginia because it does not have neutralizing language introduced by Congressman Sensenbrenner in the 1980s that would clarify that there is nothing about the ERA that connects it to eradicating or eliminating or curtailing pro-life laws or overturning existing pro-life laws. Because that neutralizing language does not exist, I would advise that the state of Virginia, rather than spending useless dollars on court cases, some of which are actually already in play from other states like Alabama and Massachusetts, which will eventually perhaps decide this at the higher level in the courts, why should Virginia pursue what is nothing more than a ceremonial vote, clearly nothing after the decisions of the DOJ and the archivist who has said that they will abide by the decisions of the DOJ at this point unless so directed from a higher court decision. So at this stage of the game, perhaps the wise angle is to consider that if there are matters that need to be addressed for the future equality and stability of women in America, let us also include unborn women and their mothers and recognize that we should go back to the drawing board, perhaps include the language offered by Congressman Sensenbrenner at the federal level, and guarantee that nothing about this ERA or any subsequent ERA will be used to hammer away at protective pro-life legislation, which affects women and their unborn daughters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there questions of this witness? Okay, is there another witness? Yes, ma'am. If you could just tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, my name is Sarahvaya, and I live in Hanover, specifically in Senator McDougal's district, wherever he may be. So I am a mother of two, and right now in Hanover, we have a biological male transgendering into a female, changing in the girls' locker room of our middle school. These 12-year-old girls accept this transgender student as an equal until they decided that they wanted to use the restroom, the same restroom. These girls have addressed their concerns with school officials and their parents and other trusted adults. They feel violated every gym class day. They have to take off their shirts, change into sports bras, so they're effectively naked during that time. In a gym locker room, they have the right of privacy. They have the right to not want to undress in front of a biological male. A gym locker room is a place where privacy is and should be expected by these young girls as a safe place. These girls are modest, they're normal, they're just like your daughters, and should be able to decide for themselves when a biological male sees their body for the first time. Instead, a 12-year-old biological male, the male school administrators are making this decision for these girls. Our community is meeting and discussing this issue, but if this ERA is ratified by Virginia and legitimized, the federal Congress would be making the decisions for our community. I think we can all agree that this decision-making process is best when those in the community make it. I truly, for the life of me, cannot understand why somebody would want to run for office in a legislative body and relinquish their power to another legislative body. If this occurs, these 12-year-old girls will be violated again by their state government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Are there questions of this witness? Okay, are there, well, everyone who opposes this resolution, I'd like them to raise their hand. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, and are the members of the committee, Senator Emmett?
I'd like to make a motion unless there's other discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, well, you can make your motion, then we can.
Okay.
See if there's
My motion is to report SJR as a substitute, incorporating SJR 5.
Second. Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, Senator Locke wanted to close before.
Mr. Chairman, I also had a question for the Attorney General based on some of the testimony I heard. I don't know if you want to hear that first.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Withdraw the motion for now. Okay, well, why don't you let Senator Sarahvaya ask his question, and then I'll ask you all to close up if you want.
And
Finish up.
for the Attorney General's office, I had a quick question. I just heard some testimony that this was going to cost us millions and millions of dollars if we went down this path. And I just wanted to see if the Attorney General's office thought that it could handle the litigation of this matter with existing taxpayer resources, so it wouldn't cost taxpayers anything.
We can certainly handle any potential litigation with the existing staff that we have.
Okay, and a further question, Mr. Speaker?
Sure.
So therefore, it's not accurate to say it will cost taxpayers anything to pass this in terms of the litigation cost, is that right?
That's correct. That assertion is not accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I apologize if the patrons want to finish up, that's,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, if Congress can include a deadline, it certainly can extend or eliminate the deadline. We heard quite a few comments about states that have rescinded their vote. Article 5 of the Constitution authorizes states to ratify amendments, but it does not give states the power to rescind their ratification. Allowing ratification while prohibiting a change of heart makes practical sense too. If states were allowed to rescind as well as ratify, there would be no point in time when we could safely say that 3/4 of the states ratified the amendment, making it part of the Constitution. The uncertainty would make it impossible to know what is or is not in the Constitution. 3 amendments to the Constitution were added while not crediting rescissions. All states that ratified, including those that had attempted to rescind a ratification, were included in the count that determined the amendment was indeed valid as part of the Constitution. The 14th Amendment. Ohio and New Jersey attempted to rescind their ratification. Their rescissions was not credited. The 14th Amendment is indeed a part of the Constitution. The 15th Amendment. New York attempted to rescind. Georgia ratified. Both were considered among ratifying states. New York's purported rescission was ignored. The 19th Amendment. Tennessee attempted to rescind, but its rescission was ignored. The 19th Amendment is indeed a part of the Constitution. So this whole idea about all of these states who have attempted to rescind is irrelevant to this discussion.
3 quick legal points. First, on the threat of litigation, we've already had years of litigation trying to have equality under the law for women, and unfortunately, litigation by itself has not been enough. We need to make it clear in the Constitution. If we don't, we'll have litigation anyway. We also had years, decades of litigation to ensure that we did not have discrimination on the basis of race and that people's right to vote was not infringed upon. So the threat of litigation is just a part of the 3 branches of government to make sure that rights that are in the Constitution are upheld. Related to that, all rights that are in the Constitution have to be balanced against each other. That includes the right to privacy. So to the extent there is any conflict between rights guaranteed in the Constitution, our court system balances those rights against each other to figure out how those laws and how those rights will interact with each other. The Equal Rights Amendment and the right to privacy are no different. And finally, we cannot change the amendment. And any pronouncements a state legislature makes on the effect of those amendments is just an opinion. So we are here to ratify the amendment that was sent to the states by Congress, not to opine on what it should or should not do. And for those reasons, we should ratify today.
okay, Senator Evan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I want to renew a motion to report SJR 1 as a substitute incorporating SJR 5.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Discussion. Does anybody have anything? Okay, I'll call the vote. Call the roll.
Ayes 10, noes 5.
Ayes 10, noes 5. The bill passes. Restrain yourselves, please. The committee's adjourned.